The prairie was cruel that evening, an endless stretch of wind and dust, golden gray under a dying sun. Martha stumbled along the dirt road with her baby pressed tight to her chest, her breath coming in short, uneven gasps. Each step sank into the dry earth, her thin shoes worn nearly through, her skirts torn at the hem. The child whimpered softly, his small body trembling with weakness, his cries barely rising above the moan of the wind. She pulled him closer, whispering his name again and again as though the sound could keep him alive. "Just a little longer, Samuel," she murmured, her voice breaking. "Mama's here. Mama won't stop." She had been walking since dawn, leaving behind the small shack where her husband had died the month before. There was nothing left there, no food, no money, no neighbors willing to take her in. Only the wind and silence. The sickness had taken him quick and cruel, leaving her with a child too young to even smile yet. She had sold his boots for a bit of flour, but even that was gone now. Her milk had dried from hunger. Samuel hadn't eaten in 2 days, and his cries had turned to pitiful little whimpers that frightened her more than any scream could. When she saw the smoke curling above the far hills, hope sparked faintly in her chest. A ranch. It had to be. She could see the outline of fences, the distant glint of a windmill turning slow in the fading light. She adjusted the baby's blanket, though it did little against the evening chill, and forced her aching feet to move faster. The closer she came, the more she saw, a wide barn, a corral full of horses, the steady rhythm of life that she had not known in weeks. She stopped at the gate, clutching the rough wooden post, her whole body shaking. "Hello," she called, her voice hoarse. "Please, someone, help me." No answer. Only the faint creak of the barn door in the wind. Her knees gave out, and she sank into the dirt, clutching the baby tighter. Tears stung her cracked cheeks. "Please," she whispered into the quiet. "Someone, please." Then she heard footsteps, slow, heavy, sure. Out from the barn came a man, tall and broad-shouldered, wiping his hands on a rag. The last light caught the edge of his jaw, the dust in his brown hair, the quiet wariness in his eyes. He was dressed like a rancher, his sleeves rolled up, his hat low against the glare. He stopped short when he saw her. "Ma'am." His voice was deep, steady, but laced with surprise. Martha tried to stand but could barely lift her head. "Please," she gasped. "My baby, he's hungry, he's so weak." He came closer, kneeling down beside her. His shadow fell over both of them, and she felt, for the first time in days, something like safety. "What happened?" he asked, glancing at the small bundle in her arms. She shook her head weakly. "There's no one left where we came from. My husband's gone. We've been walking since morning. I need milk for him." Her voice cracked, her eyes pleading. "Please, I'll do anything. Just don't let him die." The man looked down at the baby, whose face was pale beneath the dirt, tiny fists opening and closing weakly. He drew in a slow breath. For a moment, his expression changed, something deep and private flickered there, something like memory. He reached out, brushing the back of his hand gently against the baby's cheek. The infant stirred, a faint sound escaping his lips. "He's burning up," the man said quietly. "You both need to come inside." Martha blinked, not sure she'd heard right. "Inside. Now," he said firmly, sliding one arm under her shoulders to help her up. "You're shaking. You won't last another hour out here." The warmth of his arm startled her, it had been so long since anyone had touched her kindly. She let him lead her toward the house. The ranch was simple but solid, built of timber and stone, with lantern light glowing through the windows. The smell of hay and firewood filled the air. When he opened the door, heat wrapped around her like a blanket. The sound of the crackling fire made her eyes sting. He guided her to a chair near the hearth and took the baby from her arms with surprising gentleness. "I'm Jack Callahan," he said gruffly. "This is my place." She nodded faintly. Martha Reeves." Jack looked over at the baby again. "He's hungry, you said." She nodded. "He hasn't fed since yesterday morning. I tried to find a woman nursing nearby, but everyone turned me away. Said they had their own mouths to feed." Jack's jaw tightened. He stood and poured warm milk from a pot into a small tin cup. "We'll start slow," he said, dipping a clean cloth into the milk. He wrung it out and touched it to the baby's lips. Samuel sucked at it weakly, then stronger, and soon began to drink from the edge of the cup. Martha's breath caught as she watched. "Thank you," she whispered, tears falling freely. Thank you." Jack didn't answer. He only nodded and went to fetch a clean blanket. The house was quiet except for the baby's soft noises and the fire's low hiss. When the baby finally slept, full and warm, Martha's exhaustion crashed down. Her arms felt like lead, her head heavy. She looked at Jack, sitting across from her by the fire. The light flickered over his face, showing the deep lines of a man who had seen loss too. "I don't mean to trouble you," she said softly. "We'll be gone by morning. I just needed him safe for tonight." Jack's eyes met hers, calm and unreadable. "You got somewhere to go." She hesitated. "No, not anymore." He looked down at the baby, sleeping soundly for the first time in days, then back at her. "If you leave, he won't make it far. Neither will you." Martha swallowed hard. "I can't ask more of you." He leaned back, his gaze steady. "You didn't ask. I offered." She blinked, unsure if she'd heard right. "If you want that boy to live," Jack said, his voice quiet but firm, "then stay." Her lips parted in disbelief. "Stay. Here." He nodded once. "This ranch could use a woman's touch again. Been too quiet for too long. You'll have food, shelter, work if you want it." She covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking as she tried not to cry. "Why would you do that for us?" Jack's expression softened, almost imperceptibly. "Because I've buried a child," he said. "And I won't stand by and watch another die." Silence filled the room. Martha could only stare at him, unable to speak. The firelight glowed warm across the rough lines of his face, the tenderness buried beneath the dust and sorrow. Outside, the wind rose again, sweeping across the dark fields, but inside, for the first time in a long while, Martha felt the heavy weight of fear lift from her chest. She looked down at Samuel, his tiny chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm, and then back at Jack Callahan, the stranger who had saved them both. "Then we'll stay," she whispered, almost afraid to believe it. Jack gave a small nod, his eyes never leaving hers. "Good," he said quietly. "You and the boy are safe here." And in the quiet warmth of that ranch house, with the snow beginning to fall outside and the baby's soft breaths filling the silence, hope, fragile and trembling, took root once more. Winter had settled deep over the Callahan ranch. The plains that once rippled gold beneath the sun were now buried under a pale, glittering hush. Wind moaned through the trees like an old memory, and smoke from the chimney rose slow and steady into the wide, empty sky. Inside the house, the fire burned low, casting soft light across the walls, catching on the cradle near. The hearth where baby Samuel slept soundly, his tiny chest rising and falling in peaceful rhythm. Martha sat nearby, mending one of Jack's shirts by the firelight. Her hands moved slowly, but there was calm in the rhythm, something she hadn't known in months. Every so often she looked up, her gaze drifting toward the window, where the snow fell in soft waves against the glass. The world outside was harsh, unwelcoming, but in here, there was warmth, safety, and a strange kind of belonging she was almost afraid to name. It had been nearly 2 months since that night she'd arrived at his gate, desperate and half dead. Now the baby was stronger, his laughter echoing through the rooms each morning. Martha had learned the rhythm of the ranch, the chores, the animals, the way the sunrise painted the barn in shades of gold. Jack had given her space, never pressing, never demanding. He'd built her a sense of quiet respect, and that, more than food, more than shelter, had started to heal her. Jack came in from the cold just as the fire crackled louder, brushing snow from his hat and shoulders. His boots thudded against the floorboards, and the smell of leather and pine filled the room. "Evening," he said, his voice low and steady as always. Martha looked up and smiled faintly. "You've been out there long. Long enough to freeze my fingers off," he muttered, setting his gloves by the fire. His hands were red from the cold, but strong and sure. "Cattle are restless. Snow's heavier than I'd like." She set her sewing aside and stood, moving to pour him coffee from the pot on the stove. "You work too hard, Mr. Callahan." He glanced at her, a trace of a smile flickering. "I told you, call me Jack." She hesitated, then nodded softly. Jack. The name felt strange on her tongue, like something too familiar to belong to her. He took the cup from her hands, their fingers brushing just for an instant. The warmth of his skin lingered longer than it should have. He took a sip, watching her over the rim of the cup. "You keeping warm enough?" "I am," she said. "Thanks to you." He looked toward the cradle, where Samuel stirred in his sleep. "He's looking good. You did right by him." Her eyes softened as she turned toward the baby. No, she said quietly. You did. You gave him a chance to live. Jack said nothing for a while. The silence between them wasn't awkward anymore, it had turned into something quiet and gentle, like a shared understanding that didn't need words. He sat down at the table, his gaze fixed on the fire, and Martha found herself watching him. His face was rough from the cold, lines etched deep from years of work and loss. But when the firelight caught his eyes, she saw something else there, something human, fragile, and kind. She sat back down, her sewing forgotten. You ever had children? She asked softly, her tone uncertain. He was quiet for a moment, staring into the flames. I did, he said finally. A little girl. Annie. She didn't make it past her second year. Fever took her quick. Her breath caught. I'm so sorry. He nodded, jaw tight. My wife, too. After that, the house went quiet. I stopped hearing laughter. I stopped trying, I guess. He looked toward the cradle. Until you showed up at my gate that night. Martha felt her throat tighten. You saved us. Maybe you saved me, he said simply. The words hung in the warm air between them, heavier than either expected. Martha turned away, blinking fast. The baby murmured in his sleep, and she went to him instinctively, adjusting the blanket. Jack watched her, the way her touch was soft but sure, the way her presence seemed to breathe warmth back into the house. You've talked about leaving, he said after a while, his voice low. Said you might go when the weather breaks. She froze, her back to him. I thought it best not to impose. You've done enough. He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. You really think this house would be better without you in it? Her hands trembled where they rested on the baby's blanket. It's not about that. I just don't belong anywhere, Jack. Haven't for a long time. He stood slowly, crossing the room until he was just behind her. You belong here, he said quietly. She turned, startled. His eyes met hers, steady and warm, the firelight reflecting in them. This place, he continued, it's been nothing but empty since I buried my wife. But you, his voice softened, you've brought it back to life. You cook, you laugh, you care for this little one like he's the only thing in the world. You remind me what it's like to come home. Her lips trembled. Jack, I meant what I said that night, he went on. When I told you to stay, I didn't mean just for a night. Or until winter ended. I meant stay for good. Martha stared at him, tears glistening in her eyes. You don't know what you're asking. I'm just a widow with nothing to offer. He gave a quiet, rueful smile. You're wrong about that. You've already given more than you realize. He looked at Samuel, then back at her. You gave this house a heartbeat again. For a long moment, she couldn't speak. The fire popped softly, snow pattered against the window, and the silence seemed to wrap them both in something warm and fragile. Finally, she whispered, I'm scared. Of what? Of losing it all again. Of getting used to peace, and having it taken away. He reached out then, hesitating only for a moment before resting a calloused hand gently over hers. Life takes, he said softly. But sometimes, if you're lucky, it gives something back. Maybe not what you lost, but something worth holding onto. Her tears spilled over, silent and hot. For the first time in a long while, she didn't pull her hand away. Jack's voice dropped to a murmur. You and that boy, you don't have to go anywhere. You've got a place here. If you want it. The clock ticked softly on the mantel. Samuel stirred, letting out a small sigh in his sleep, and Martha glanced down at him, her heart swelling with a mix of fear and gratitude so deep it hurt. When she looked back up, Jack was still watching her, steady, patient, the kind of gaze that didn't demand anything, only offered. She swallowed hard. Then, we'll stay, she whispered. A quiet smile touched his lips, small but real. Good. He picked up another log, set it on the fire, and watched as the flames climbed higher, filling the room with golden light. Martha sat beside him again, their hands still close on the edge of the table. For a while, they said nothing more. They didn't need to. The fire spoke for them, crackling warm and alive, a promise written in light and quiet understanding. Outside, the snow kept falling over the fields, soft and endless. But inside that little ranch house, the world felt safe again. For the first time since her husband's death, Martha let herself believe in tomorrow. And when she looked at Jack Callahan, this quiet man who'd opened his home and heart to her, She saw not just the man who had saved her baby's life, but the man who had given both of them a chance to start living theirs.